Hey guys, what's up? It's Eric with Advanced Level Automotive. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another case study. You know, every now and then I'll get called out for something pretty interesting. Today's one of those days. Right behind me we have a 1993 Dodge Viper SRT-10. The customer complaint is that the vehicle is a no start. It's a no crank, no start. Now the mechanic's already taken a look at it. They figured out that they could get the engine to crank over if they play a little bit with the clutch pedal. They could get the engine to crank, but they still can't get the engine to run. So that's why they called me out to come check it out. Anyways, you guys already know how we do it. Let's go ahead and get started. But first, let's do a walk around. Okay guys, so as you can tell, the car has seen better days. Now our job is to get it back up and running. First thing I noticed is that when I tried to get inside the vehicle to crank it up, I couldn't find a door handle anywhere. So I looked around and for the life of me, I could not figure out how to open the door. Turns out that you have to open up this little window here. You see it's got a zipper on the outside of this vinyl window, and you just reach your hand in here and open up the door. So I mean, I don't know if this is how they came from the factory. Seems to me like a pretty bad design because, you know, anyone can just get into your vehicle by pulling the zipper. But anyway, so the door is open now. Let's go ahead and get inside, take a look. Again, the mechanics have been working on this thing, so we've got some trim panels loose. But first things first, let me get inside and let's see if we can start this thing. Okay, so we're inside the vehicle. I've got the key right over here. I'm gonna go ahead and stick it into the ignition. If I can find it, right over here. There we go. Turn the key on. So you can see the instrument panel lights up. We have a check engine light, and looks like gauges here are working. So make sure this thing is in neutral. I'm gonna go ahead and put my foot on the clutch, push down. And man, this seat's kind of far back, so I gotta lean back. And I'm gonna go ahead and attempt to crank it. And nothing happened. So let me try that again, show you guys. Tried to crank it, nothing is happening. Now the mechanic did mention to me that he could get the engine to crank over by playing with the clutch pedal a little bit, and I can tell you right now it does feel like it's pretty loose. So let's take a quick look down here and see if we can figure out what's going on. Okay, so looking in the footwell here, again we have our three pedals: the accelerator pedal, brake pedal, and this is our clutch pedal here. And again, the first thing I noticed is that this clutch pedal is pretty loose. So if you look up at the bracket, see if I can show you guys, looks like the bushing up here is kind of worn out. So yeah, we're gonna need to get that fixed. But if you look right over here, I think you'll spot the neutral safety switch, or the clutch safety switch. Let me focus in on that right there. This is our clutch safety switch. As you can see, I can move this thing up and down. So if we push it all the way up, this should be closed all the way. So this should close the switch and allow us to crank the engine over. Now, if we push down on the clutch pedal, you'll see the rod going in, and looks to me like the clutch pedal is being stopped by this bracket here. Yeah, you can actually tell where this piece right here has been hitting the bracket. If you take a close look, you'll see how the bracket is kind of eaten up right here. So I wonder if what they did was push the pedal over and get past the bracket, because if I push it down like this, you'll see it hits the bracket. But if I move it over just a little bit beyond that point, I can go a little further. Yep, right there, and then fully engage that clutch switch. So I think that's how they're getting this thing to crank over. But I wonder if I can just push this up like this and get the engine to crank. So I'm gonna try to hold it like this. Let me put the camera down and I'm going to see if I can crank the engine over. Sorry guys, we're kind of in a weird position here, but I'm going to try to crank the engine over. Oh yeah, it's an issue with this clutch safety switch. I'm going to try to crank it over again. Sounds like the battery's pretty low, so we're gonna have to put a jumper on this. Let me see if I can do that real quick. Okay, so as you guys can see, we have the hood open and I've got the jump box connected. If you look right down over here, you'll see that we have where we can hook up the positive lead of our jumper cable. Now they don't give us a post for the negative, so I've just got it attached to a bracket right here on top of the intake manifold, so that should be a good ground. Now moving inside the vehicle to make it easy on me as far as cranking it, I just went ahead and took a pair of vice grips and I clamped down the clutch safety switch. Let me take you down in here, show you. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that. This is the clutch safety switch right here. I just used a pair of vice grips. I slid that switch up to close it, and I put a pair of vice grips on the rod to hold it into place, so that way I don't have to mess with the clutch pedal to try to get this thing to crank. Now, of course, the shifter is in neutral, and let me go ahead and engage the parking brake just to make sure that this car doesn't go anywhere. Okay, now let's go ahead and try to crank this thing over. Okay, so as you can see, engine cranks, but it does not start. Now, this is a 1993 vehicle, so it is pre-OBD2. As far as scan tools, we're not gonna have a whole lot of information that we can gather from the computer. I think the first thing that we should do are just some basic checks. We're gonna go under the hood. We're gonna check for spark. We're gonna check for fuel. We're gonna see if we can figure out what we're missing. Okay, so the first check we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and check for spark. So as you can see, I have my test light. Oh, I just lost it. Let me pick it up right here. Got my test light connected to a ground. I'm just on the alternator bracket over here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull one of these ignition wires off, and we're going to set it up here. And then I'm going to take my test light, stick it into the end of it, and then I'm going to have somebody crank the engine over. And I'm not looking for the test light to light. What I'm looking for is an arc to happen across this gap between the test light and the ignition cable. So I'm gonna go ahead and have somebody crank it over. ¿Lo puede arrancar? Okay, dale otra vez. Okay, I don't know if you guys could tell, but I didn't see any spark jump in the gap here. I know it's pretty sunny outside right now, but I should still be able to see a pretty significant or clear spark. I didn't see anything. All right, so it's kind of bright outside, so we moved it inside of the garage here. It's a little bit darker, so we might be able to see a little bit better. We're gonna go ahead and crank the engine over and see if this thing has any spark. Dale. Okay, I don't know if you guys could see that, but we definitely had spark. It's kind of weak, but we still had spark, so that's one thing to note. Let's go ahead and move on to the next test. Okay, so the next test we're gonna do is we're gonna check for injector pulse. So I went ahead and I chose one of the injectors. We're just going to pick this injector right here in the front. Now, I already went ahead and removed the clip that goes around the connector. So we're just gonna go ahead and disconnect this. Now, what we're gonna do is we are going to determine which is the control wire and which is the power supply for this injector. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'm going to use my test light here. My test light's connected to a ground, and we're gonna go ahead and turn the ignition key on. Then we're gonna touch both of these terminals and we're gonna see which one has a power source. Now I'm gonna go ahead and touch both of these pins. Again, the ignition switch is in the on position, and we don't have power on either one of these. Okay. Now, some of these Dodge models I know will not have a power feed on the injectors or control until we start cranking the engine over. So let's go ahead and try to crank the engine over. Arráncale. Okay, so I don't show a power on either one of these two pins. Okay, so before we move ahead, there is something I did notice. And if you guys look at this connector, we got a bunch of green crusties in here. Let's try to focus in on that right there. So we got some green crusties on this connector. I just wanted to make sure that I was having a good connection. You see that? So I just wanted to make sure I had a good connection with my test light. I'm gonna try that test again. So we're going to stick the test light in here again. We're going to make sure we've got a good connection with the terminal. I'm just gonna kind of give it a little bit of a scraping action here so we can get good contact with the terminal. Let's try to crank this over again. Arráncale. We're gonna see the key on, so we have power there. Our battery's getting low. Try it again. Dale otra vez. Okay, so our battery is low. But we're gonna try and see if we have any action on this side over here. Dale otra vez. Okay, so we know we have power to the injectors. The jump pack's just getting low. Let me stick this thing on the charger and then we'll come back to this. Okay, dale. Okay, all right, so as you can see, we have power on our green and orange wire. Now let's check the other terminal again. Actually, in order to check the other wire, which is gonna be the control wire, we're gonna need to change our lead from the ground to a power source. So let me get to the battery power source on that side. Okay, so I've got the test light connected to battery power post right here. Let's go back to the other side. Okay, so now we're back on the control wire. Let's go ahead and crank it. Dale. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me try to zoom in here. Dale. It's barely showing up on camera, but you can see that we do have injector pulse. Let me try to focus in. Let me get somewhere darker here. Right there. Dale. Okay. All right, guys. So as you can see, we do have injector pulse. We do have power getting to the injectors. We have good injector pulse. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, guys. So we know we have good spark and we know we have good injector pulse. So next up, we want to verify whether or not we have a problem with the fuel system. You know, it could be something like a fuel pump or a fuel delivery issue. And one of the quickest ways to verify that is by taking a can of starter fluid. Now, I know you guys know that you need to be real careful when you're using this. Always make sure that you have a fire extinguisher nearby. We're just going to put a quick spray into each one of these intakes and we're going to attempt to crank the engine over. We want to see if the engine attempts to start, and that's going to give us a clue as to whether or not we have a fueling issue. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick spray. Get in there. Okay. Dale. And as you guys can see, the engine attempted to start and it just died. So it definitely looks like we have a fueling issue. Let's go ahead and attack the fuel pump. Okay, guys, so while we're trying to locate the fuel pump, which is turning out to be a little more difficult than we thought because we can't find any service information that tells us where the fuel pump is located, there is one quick thing I wanted to explain to you guys. That is the reason for me using the starting fluid instead of just checking for fuel pressure. And let me explain to you guys why. So if you take a look at the intake manifold, you'll notice these are the fuel injectors up here at the top. And what you'll notice is that if you look, there is no external fuel rail or access to the fuel rail to these fuel injectors. And if you pay attention, you'll realize that there is no fuel rail. It's actually cast into the intake manifold. So there really is no way or no simple way to check the fuel pressure up here at the engine. So that's why I opted for using the starting fluid. Anyways, I just wanted to let you guys know. Let me go ahead and figure out where this fuel pump is located. All right, guys, so check this out. I couldn't find any information online or on All Data or on Mitchell as far as how to remove or get to the fuel pump. Let me show you guys underneath the vehicle where the gas tank is located. So if you look down here, let me show you guys up above the frame. You'll see the fuel filter located right up there. And right above it is the gas tank. Now this gas tank, in order to bring it down, you would think that you could remove this frame on the backside, but this is actually not a subframe. This frame is actually one piece throughout the whole bottom of the car. So there really is no easy way to drop the gas tank on this. You would literally have to remove the fiberglass body off of the frame. So I'm not really sure how we're going to get to the fuel pump. Now, I thought maybe there was some access behind the seats, but we tried to fold the seats over or remove them. We couldn't get any access to the fuel pump. I think there is one more access point that we might try. There seems to be a panel in the trunk that's riveted shut, and I think that we might have to drill the rivets out of the panel in the trunk, and then maybe we might be able to gain access to the fuel pump. Again, I'm not really sure. We're just kind of trying to figure out how to get to it so that we can test it. All right, guys, so we are back. It's actually been about 2 weeks now since I've last seen the vehicle, and quite a bit has happened since then. So let me get you guys all caught up. First of all, the mechanics did go ahead and replace the fuel pump. Let me show you guys. So there is an access panel or an access door in the trunk here. So if you look around here, there was a cover and it was riveted on. You see these holes? So they had to drill the rivets out in order to remove that cover so that they could gain access to the fuel tank. As you can see, this is our fuel tank. It's kind of small, and you can see our two straps for the fuel tank. So they went ahead and they took it out, and when they pulled the fuel pump out, they noticed that the fuel inside the tank was really nasty. It smelled really bad, and it was full of a lot of crud. So they went ahead and cleaned out the entire gas tank. They put a new fuel pump in it. They put a new fuel filter, and then they cranked the engine over, but it still wouldn't start. And so they decided to disconnect the line underneath the vehicle. And when they did that, they saw fuel shooting out, but there was a lot of crud in there. So they tried to flush the line that goes all the way up to the fuel rail on the engine. And when they tried to pressurize the line, they noticed that it was pretty much blocked. So they had to shoot some carb cleaner through the line to get it to flush all the way through. And they were able to remove the blockage that was in the fuel line. But even after doing that, they still were not able to start up the vehicle. And so at that point, they wanted me to take a look at it because, like I explained to you guys before, this engine does not actually have a fuel rail. If you take a look at this intake manifold and these injectors, you'll notice that the injectors are inserted into the casting. So there is no actual physical fuel rail. The fuel rail is cast into this aluminum intake manifold. And if you look down in here, you'll see the fuel line where it attaches into the intake manifold. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in. I don't know if you guys can see that metal line down there, but it's just bolted to the intake manifold down there, and that is the only fuel line going to the intake manifold or this fuel rail. So if you take a look at this thing, there is actually no return line. I believe the fuel pressure regulator is actually built into the tank. It's part of the fuel pump hanger assembly. So in this case, it's a pretty simple setup. We just have one straight line coming from the fuel tank up to this fuel rail or this intake manifold, which supplies fuel to all of these injectors. And that's how these injectors are able to supply fuel to the cylinders. Now, naturally, our concern here is that we may have some type of blockage in this fuel rail that's cast into this aluminum housing. So if that's the case, first of all, how do we go about diagnosing that? And second of all, how do we actually clean it out? So that's what I'm trying to figure out now. Like I said, the last time I tried to take a fuel pressure reading with the fuel pressure gauge, and I could not visually find any Schrader valve because there is no fuel rail. But the mechanic actually pointed something out to me. If you look right here, deep behind the intake manifold, I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me try to focus in on that and see if I can get a good image right there. This little cap right here is going to be the access or the Schrader valve to the fuel line. So I'm gonna pull this off. This is the cap right here. I can already smell that fuel smells really nasty. It smells old. And there's our Schrader valve. Again, I don't know if you guys can see it on the camera, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and hook up my fuel gauge, maybe try to get a pressure reading. We can also probably just use the hose to take a fuel sample. I think that might be the first thing I want to do. I want to see what the fuel inside of this fuel rail looks like, because like I said, they already flushed out the line, everything from the gas tank all the way up to this point. They've already flushed it out. Whatever we're dealing with is whatever is inside the intake manifold. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so what I have is my fuel hose adapter here from my fuel pressure tester kit, and I'm just going to screw this onto the back of the intake manifold here. It's going to be kind of a tight spot. Let me try to get this in there. Got to keep it on there straight. Make sure we don't cross thread this thing. Come on. This coolant hose is kind of in our way here. All right, guys, I'm going to need two hands for this. I'm going to have to put the camera down. All right, so let me show you the setup that I have. I have the fuel adapter line or the hose connected to the Schrader valve here, and then I just have this rubber hose going into an empty water bottle, and I'm going to use that to take a fuel sample. So let me go ahead and crank the engine over. Okay, I'm just going to reach in and try to turn the key. Let's see if we can crank this thing and get some fuel. All we have no fuel coming up to that water bottle. Let me try it again. Sounds like the battery's dying. Yeah, got nothing. Check that water bottle again. Make sure. Yeah, guys, we have no fuel coming up to this point. Let me get a jump pack on this thing and try to crank it again. All right, so we got the jump pack connected. We're gonna attempt to crank it once again. Dale. Make sure I got a good connection. Oh, we got to turn on the jump pack. Like that. Oh, this thing started up. Okay. Why do I have no fuel? Dale otra vez. Really sounds like this thing wanted to start, but I'm not showing any fuel coming out of this end. I wonder if we might have a blockage somewhere in the fuel rail, and it's not even getting out to this point over here. Make sure I'm tightened all the way down. Yep, that's tight. Okay, I wonder what to do next. Maybe we should try pulling out one of the injectors. I guess we could pull them out one at a time to see which ones are getting fuel and which ones are not. I guess that's an option. Maybe we're only getting fuel to certain parts of the fuel rail and there's a blockage somewhere. I guess that's probably gonna be the next step. Let me go ahead and try to pull these injectors out. All right, guys, so I was hoping to pull those injectors out today, but unfortunately, we had a change in weather, so it's raining pretty hard. And you know, there's really nowhere for me to put it inside at the moment. They're packed right now. This car's just kind of sitting out there, so I had to close it up. I'm just gonna have to come back tomorrow. Hopefully it's not gonna be raining, and we'll get back to it. All right, guys, it is the following day. It is nice and sunny today, so we're gonna go ahead and attack these injectors. Now, I went ahead and I removed the injector connectors. These had these little clips around them, so I had to disengage the clips and disconnect all 10 injectors. And like I noticed before, there is some green corrosion in pretty much all of these connectors, so we are gonna have to give these connectors a treatment. Maybe hit them with the wire brush. That one looks pretty bad. You see those green crusties in there? So yeah, these injectors or these connectors are gonna have to get cleaned up, make sure they have good contact. But again, we're worried about fuel delivery. We know that we pretty much should have fuel pressure reaching up to the plenum here at this point where the line connects. Down here at the bottom, you see that metal tube where it connects to the intake manifold. But what we wanna know is, why are we not getting fuel out of the backside of the intake manifold over here where the Schrader valve was? So I'm gonna start by removing the injectors. I think what I'm gonna do is probably just remove them one at a time, maybe starting with this one because this one is closest to where the fuel supply is. I wanna go ahead and remove this injector, look inside the hole, and I wanna see if we're getting fuel delivery into this part of the intake manifold. So let me go ahead and pull this injector out. All right, so it looks like we have an 11mm bolt holding the injector down. I'm gonna go ahead and remove it. Now we can remove this little clamp. Make sure we keep these together. We do not lose these. Now it looks like I should just be able to pull up on the injector. I kind of figured it was gonna be stuck in there, so I've got a little pry bar. I'm gonna try to pry up on this fuel injector. Sounds like there's some pressure in there. Oh yeah, we got fuel coming out. You guys see that? There's some pressure in there. Gotta be careful. Yep. Let me zoom you guys in. All right, so if you guys pay attention to the fuel injector, I'm gonna pry up on it. You guys are gonna be able to see that we have fuel pressure coming out of it. Whoa, gotta be real careful with that. Okay, so we know we definitely have fuel pressure coming up to here. I guess before I try to pull this injector out, let me see if any of these injectors do not have fuel pressure behind them. Okay, so I have all of the clamps removed for the fuel injectors on this side of the intake manifold. I'm gonna try to pry up on this one, see if we have any fuel pressure behind it. We got some pressure here. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm gonna try the next one. We got some fuel pressure here. Let's try the next one. Yep, we got some pressure there. Now the next one. Looks like we've got pressure there. Let me try to, well, let me go ahead and reprime the fuel pump so we can get pressure back into the intake manifold. And I'm gonna go ahead and remove the clamps on this side for the fuel injectors on the other side. Okay, so I went ahead and I removed the clamps for the injectors on this side. And I also went ahead and I cycled the key in order to prime the fuel pump. I'm basically gonna do the same thing like I did on the other side. I'm going to gently pry up on the fuel injector. I wanna see if there's any fuel pressure behind this, so pay attention. A little bit of pressure behind that one. Really not a lot because I don't see any fuel coming out. On the other side, we had plenty of fuel coming out whenever I did this test. So I'm gonna do this injector here. You see how fuel came out right there? You can hear it hissing. Let me try the next one here. Oop. See how that fuel just shot up? Got some good pressure behind it. Try this one here. Move that connector out of the way. Come on, move. Okay, pay attention. See how we got fuel coming out there? Lots of pressure. Try this one. Same thing. Got fuel coming out. But I did not see any fuel coming out of this last injector here. And this other one here was kind of low pressure, so I'm gonna pry up on this one again. I don't want to break this injector. Just trying to pry it up and out of the hole. But we have no fuel coming out. Maybe it might work a little bit easier if I use a pair of pliers to pull up on it. So let me go ahead and try that. All right, guys, so check this out. I went ahead and I double checked my test. I reprimed the fuel pump and I pulled up on these injectors one at a time. And again, there was fuel squirting out of these injectors. When I got to this last one, I pulled up on it again and take a look at the shit that came out of here. I don't know what that is, but there was a bunch of crud that came out of this injector here. So I'm gonna try to pull this injector out. We're gonna see what it looks like. ¿Lo puedes jalar? Sí. A ver si. I'm gonna go ahead and try to pull this injector out. There's still some pressure behind it. But let's see if we can get it out. Oh, shit. ¿Tienes una garrita? Sí, una garra. Yeah, so take a look, guys. You see that crud that just came out of that hole? Sorry about the focus on my camera. It's acting up today. You see that crud that just came out of that hole? This thing is sludged up. We're gonna attempt to pull this fuel injector out and take a look inside of that hole. No, tápale todo. No se quiere salir. A ver si con las pinzas. There we go. Take a look inside of that hole. Wow. See the injector? Yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to clean those injectors. That's going to have to get replaced. Man, mira adentro. Hay un montón adentro. Yeah, guys, so it looks like the intake manifold is going to have to come out in order for us to completely flush the fuel rail that's built into this intake manifold. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that for you guys. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show that on camera. They're probably going to do that here at the shop, but that's what's going to have to happen. Just wanted to show you guys another close-up of this fuel injector that we pulled out. Take a look at that. That is insane. This thing is so clogged up and full of sludge. I don't know if this is due to the fuel sitting for a long time, or maybe somebody tried to put sand in the fuel tank, because this definitely feels like sand. It's gritty. I've never seen old fuel do this before, so kind of looks to me like somebody tried to do some serious damage to this engine. Let's take a look inside of that hole. You can see all of this crud that's in there, and it's real gritty. Feels like sand. And like I said, this stuff was all throughout the fuel line in the gas tank. So yeah, this thing is going to need to get removed. The intake manifold is going to need to get flushed out, and these injectors are going to have to get replaced. All right guys, so let me show you. They've got the intake off. I was just stopping by the shop and see if I can get you guys an image of what they're doing or what they did. So they already went ahead and cleaned out the ports. Let me show you where the fuel port is. So again, these ports at the top are where the injectors are located. They've got them all nice and cleaned out now. They completely flushed it out. And if we look at the bottom here, you'll see this is where the fuel intake goes. The fuel supply goes into the cast aluminum here, and it goes through these channels inside of this intake manifold. And then it comes out over here. This is where the Schrader valve was. And the mechanic was telling me that when he pulled the Schrader valve out, there was just a bunch of crud in there. They couldn't even blow it out. They had to use like a coat hanger to get all that stuff broken up so that they could flush it out. Anyways, this thing is now completely clean. They're getting ready to put it on. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to film that for you guys. I'm sorry. I just wanted to show you it while they had it off the vehicle. This thing is nice and clean. They're going to go ahead and reinstall it on the Viper, and they're going to put new injectors on there. We're going to see if we can start this thing up.